What's up, family? There is chaos, anarchy, pure anarchy in the National Football League.
You're sending a bad look and a message to your team saying, we know we don't give a bleep about the running back.
We talking about some of the top players in the league.
Tony Pollard,
Saquon Barkley,
Josh Jacobs,
Derrick Henry,
Austin Eckler.
If I'm looking at some of the backup receivers out here that are still making more than me, that's going to piss me off.
Teams are increasingly aware that they can get comparable production from younger players on cost-controlled contracts.
The only guys complaining were other running backs. It wasn't
everybody else gets paid.
The running back is the only position where you are a car. The minute we take you off and we drive you, your value goes down.
You're literally looking at their production and you're ignoring it at your discretion.
Let me get right to it. Running backs are getting screwed over by the National Football League. It ain't right. It ain't right.
We apparently need to have a conversation about running back contracts now, because all the situations have come to a head with Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and of course now Jonathan Taylor as well, and they've all gotten a little bit messy. Also, by the way, you might have noticed that is not LA in the background behind me. I'm actually on travel right now. I'm visiting EJ up in Washington so that we can finish off our 40 episode long podcast series covering every single team in every single division, getting all of you ready for the 2023 season. So if you're interested in exceptionally nerdy scheme talk, that's why I haven't been releasing very many videos over here, is because I've been releasing something every single day over on the Bootleg Football channel. So yeah, a couple more divisions to go. That's why we're recording it from here. And yeah, go check that out if you want to. But anyway, back to running backs. And spoiler alert, by the way, I do actually have a practical solution to this problem that could probably solve it for every single team across the league, because there is a cap mechanism that exists that we can exploit, for lack of a better word, in order to get everybody paid without actually costing a lot against the cap. It'll require some finagling by the union and an agreement with the owners, but it would make players happy, it would make GMs happy, owners happy, but most importantly of all, it would make the fans happy. So there is a way to fix this, but before I get into that, I need to set up a bunch of context first to explain how we got here and how contracts as they are now actually work. Let's start at the beginning. Every single running back in the league is pissed. They feel like they're being underpaid relative to the amount that they produce and due to the amount of punishment they have to take to achieve that production. And to be totally honest, they are right to be pissed. They are underpaid to a degree. You've got receivers now making 25, 27, likely soon to be 30 or more $1 million per year, while top running backs are making at absolutely most half of that, and usually now only about a quarter to a third of that number, all while those running backs get 3 or 4 times the amount of touches as those same receivers, and by extension take 3 or 4 times the amount of hits every year. Their careers are shorter and more damaging, and they make a lot less money, despite on more than one occasion being the entire heart and soul of their offense. Would the Titans have gone on their AFC Championship run without Derrick Henry? Absolutely not. Would the Giants have even sniffed the playoffs last year without Saquon? Also, probably not. Going back in recent history, during the peak Arian Foster years in Houston, the Texans' offense could not function without him. And in that same era, the early 2010s Vikings were almost entirely reliant on Adrian Peterson being, well, himself, or else the entire offense was pretty much dead in the water. There are so many examples of teams around the NFL needing a top running back in order to really operate at their peak efficiency. And when teams have an elite back, it really does make a difference. But here's the problem. Even though there are not that many elite running backs running around the NFL in any given year, usually there's a lot of really good ones. And a really good running back that costs $3 to $5 million on a mid-tier deal, or maybe even a first-round rookie contract, if they can just get 80% of the production of that elite back despite costing maybe a third of the price, from both an analytics and financial perspective, going with the cheaper running back that is good rather than great is honestly the better option. And that doesn't even factor in the rookie wage scale for day 3 picks at running back, which causes a whole new set of headaches for veterans, because every single draft class usually injects several new good young backs into the league that cost a lot less than $3 to $5 million on their rookie deals, while again still producing at a 70% or better rate to the top tier backs. Take Tyler Algier last year with the Falcons as an example. He was a top 15 running back in the league in terms of production last year, with over 1,000 yards behind a dominant run-blocking line in Atlanta, all while having a dirt-cheap contract by NFL standards that only pays him $998,472 per year. If you compare Algier's contract to, say, Nick Chubb, who's not even all the way at the top of the running back market himself, by the way, he's only at about 3/4 of what Christian McCaffrey's being paid, but $12.2 million is still a solid chunk of cash. Well, if you look at the second half of last season, after Algier really asserted himself as the starter in Atlanta, he was actually outproducing Chubb on the ground while making only 8% of the money that Chubb is. Yes, Chubb is the better running back, and if I had to pick one to be on my team, it'd be him. And so is Bijan Robinson, by the way, who the Falcons just drafted to start ahead of Algier this year. He's also better and also will make more money than Algier, obviously. Nobody would ever dispute that Bijan and Nick are better players, but the fact that teams can go cheap at running back and get both Bijan and Algier at combined salaries that are less than half of the going rate for a top back, that means they can allocate their salary cap elsewhere for years and years and years on end while still having very productive running games. And that's a problem for elite veteran backs. Not only do those veterans have to compete for work with cheap rookies like Algier, who can do 80% of the job for 8% of the money, but they also have to compete with guys like Bijan, who might be just as good as them and do 100% of the job, but still for a hell of a lot less money than top backs are asking for on the open market, because Robinson costs a little under $5.5 million, while the top 5 running backs in terms of pay average $13.4 million. By the time veteran running backs get to free agency these days, usually they're in their 5th, 6th, or sometimes even 7th season in Saquon's case, because he had 5 years on that rookie deal, plus this 6th year, which is technically the tag year, and then he's maybe going to be a free agent next year. But by year 7, that's 6, and I'm talking minimum of 6 more draft classes for Saquon that have since come into the league that are just pumping the NFL full of younger, cheaper, and still dynamic backs that are all under cost-controlled contracts. And, oh, by the way, that 7th year for veteran backs is usually right around when their prime of production is starting to tail off. So their best seasons are, again, usually already behind them, which means their best leverage in negotiations is already behind them. So quite frankly, at the end of the day, NFL owners have zero incentive to pay these veterans because they can just draft new guys and keep the cycle going forever and ever and ever. It's Moneyball, but unfortunately Moneyball in the NFL really screws the running back position in particular. But as I said earlier, I do actually have a solution to this, because just because GMs don't have an incentive to sign running backs right now doesn't mean that we can't create that incentive in order to remedy this situation for the future. And no, before you even think about it, I'm not talking about having shorter contracts for rookie running backs and having them hit free agency a year earlier, because that would be an absolute nightmare to try to enforce from the NFLPA's perspective. Teams would abuse the absolute shit out of that rule for players like Debo that are kind of like hybrid receivers / running backs. And for players that are more on the running back side of the spectrum than receiver, they could just draft them as a receiver to get the extra contract length and then use them as a running back anyway. It would just be an absolute nightmare to enforce, and nobody wants that. So no, I'm not talking about contract lengths. Instead, my proposal that benefits all position groups, but especially benefits running backs the most, is let's create a new salary cap rule where if a player is franchise tagged and then signs an extension either before the tag deadline or in the following free agency period after the tagged season, all contract bonuses that fall under the likely to be earned category do not count towards the salary cap at all, and all bonuses that are unlikely to be earned only count 50% towards the cap of the following year. Now, if you don't know what a likely to be earned or unlikely to be earned bonus is, don't worry, it's relatively simple, and I'll use Saquon as our example here just because he's the biggest name that's been caught up in all this right now, but you can use this same line of thinking for Jonathan Taylor or Jacobs or Pollard or whoever. Last year, Barkley gained 1,650 yards from scrimmage. If he has a contract incentive for another year of 1,650 rushing and receiving yards combined, because he hit that number in 2022, that bonus is considered likely to be earned. If he did not hit for 1,650 yards in 2022, then it would have been considered not likely to be earned. As it stands now, likely to be earned bonuses count towards the current year's cap because, again, they are likely to be earned, and if the player does not reach those milestones, then the team basically gets a refund of their cap space a year later because the player did not hit their incentive. By contrast, of course, not likely to be earned bonuses do not count towards this year's cap because they're not likely, but if they are reached, then they will count towards next year's cap because the player hit their target number. What I'm proposing is that likely to be earned bonuses do not count as a cap hit at all for franchise tag players, and that is only on the contract they sign after they're tagged. So a consistent 1,600-yard producer that gets the tag as an elite running back, like say Saquon, he can just keep hitting 1,600 a year and get paid a big-ass bonus every season with no extra hit to their team's cap. So the Giants are incentivized to keep him around because he's getting elite production for a lot less money. And if he has an especially big year in 2023 and both runs and receives for a total of, let's say, 1,800 yards to trigger an unlikely to be earned bonus for $4 million more, then it only counts by half. So it's only a $2 million hit, not a $4 million hit. Now, small caveat here, in order to prevent teams from also abusing the absolute shit out of this rule by stuffing every last dollar of the contract into cap-free bonuses, is that in order to qualify for those cap-free bonuses, the minimum average annual cash salary, meaning the salary that's on the books, has to be equivalent to the cap number of that position group the year that it's signed. What this structure would allow teams like the Giants to do for Saquon specifically is they can offer him a deal after tagging him that pays him $10.1 million a year in salary, which is the current tag number for running back, but then, like I said, also have the ability to build in a likely to be earned bonus for getting 1,600 yards from scrimmage, which he did do last year. And again, that can give him, let's say, $6 million more to get him up to CMC's number without any extra cap penalty. And then on top of that, also having the unlikely to be earned bonus for that aforementioned 1,800 yards from scrimmage, which he did not do last year. And that could trigger for him to get another $4 million that could give Barkley $20 million in real cash going into his bank account, but it would only cost the Giants roughly $12 million in cap space. This structure, in my opinion, is a win for everybody because elite backs like Barkley could get their pay effectively doubled just by producing like we normally expect them to produce, so they're heavily incentivized to keep going. And the teams themselves are also heavily incentivized to give these types of contracts out because, well, they could get elite production from elite players without paying elite money. Not to mention a nice little byproduct of this structure is that mid-tier players are not going to get tagged as often because teams aren't going to want to pay that salary floor that's equivalent to the tag number for multiple years, which ultimately means that those mid-tier players are going to hit the market more often, which then drives up the prices for not just mid-tier players themselves, but also for the elite tier players that want to get paid more than they do. You look at what happened to the receiver market after Christian Kirk got his bag, and, well, we would see that ripple effect a lot more often, which is good for everybody, or at least good for the players. So to recap, GMs and cap guys are happy because they can pay bonuses to their core players, like Saquon, with no cap penalty. Owners are happy because they can keep selling jerseys and putting butts in seats to see those star players in the first place. The tagged players, running backs especially, are happy because they can get a ton more money. And the rest of the locker room is happy because less of them ultimately will get tagged too, unless they themselves are a star player that's going to be making a lot of cash anyway. Oh, and the fans are also going to be happier too because they won't have to deal with all these holdouts anymore, so there's that too. Now, the elephant in the room here. Do I ever think that anything like this actually will get passed? Probably not. Because as we know by now, Giants fans are not allowed to have nice things. But I do genuinely hope that eventually we get something like this, because as sad as it is, something like this might be the only way for veteran running backs to ever actually get paid what they're worth. I wish it was different. I wish the market was not the way that the market is, but it is what it is. So if we want these guys to get paid, something like this has to be done. In my opinion, it's the only option. I'll be honest, by the way, I was struggling to figure out how to end this video because I was supposed to put a mid-roll ad read in the middle of this thing, and I felt like that was going to disrupt the flow and make it a much worse YouTube viewing experience, so I didn't do that. And now I just have an ad read hanging on the end of this episode, so I'm going to make you a deal. In exchange for me not making your YouTube experience worse and having an ad read at the end rather than in the middle, I want you to watch this really sexy slow-mo B-roll that I shot of all this Factor food, and I want you to ask yourself one question. Is this stuff better than what I normally bring into work for my lunch break? The answer may or may not be yes, but just ask yourself if a really fresh, really tasty meal that's made from real ingredients and can be heated up in 2 minutes, is that something that you're interested in? There's dozens of different types of meals to pick from. They sent me a black pepper and sage pork chop last week as an example. I also had some cheesy bacon ranch shredded chicken that was unreasonably good for a microwave meal. There's beef bowls, there's shrimp and salmon and different types of pastas. There's vegetarian food and stuff with lots of protein. Whatever you can think of for whatever your dietary preferences are, they've got it, and it's all delicious and convenient and delivered right to your door so that you don't have to bother with grocery shopping for midday meals just to get you through the day. That's really the main selling point here. It's just good food that you can eat really fast on days that you don't have time to eat really good food. That's it. Like that's all they do. So if you feel like you're missing something like that in your life to make your life a little bit more convenient and maybe a little bit healthier, just try out Factor. That's all you got to do. And if you want a promo code to make it cheaper so that it's a little bit more painless to try it out, especially on your first box, you can use promo code FilmRoom50 at Factor75.com. That'll give you a 50% discount on that first box so that you can try it as easily and as cheaply as you possibly can. Again, that is promo code FilmRoom50 at Factor75.com for a 50% discount on your first box. And just give it a whirl. See if it helps you out. I also encourage people in the comments that if you've tried Factor before, leave an honest review down below. I'm not asking you to shill for the product. I'm not asking you to lie. Just give your honest thoughts on it because I know they're probably going to read these anyway. And if you have any feedback for them, let them know down below. I fully trust that the reviews are going to be good just because I use it and I like it. So be as honest as you want. I'm not here to trick anybody. I'm just here to give promo codes so that you can try it out. And I don't know. This ad read's gone on long enough. I think it's time for me to wrap this up because it's getting pretty hot. I got nothing else for you. I'll see you next week.